Welcome to another episode of Celluloid Citizens. I'm very excited because we have a special guest today. Our guest is Gemma Files. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good, can't complain.
Excellent.
But Gemma came by so we could discuss the 1991 film Proof, directed and written by Jocelyn Moorhouse, starring Hugo Weaving, Russell Crowe, and Genevieve Picot.
Yep.
Got it all right, yeah. So you were the one that recommended this film.
Yeah, it's a film that a lot of people either haven't seen or haven't seen for a long time. So that was one thing. Another thing is that it's an Australian film, and half of my heritage is Australian. My dad's Australian, which is how I saw it in the first place. The third thing is that the Australian film industry is a lot like the Canadian film industry, which I know a fair amount about.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, and I always think it's really interesting looking at the relative success of the Australian film industry as opposed to the relative unsuccess of the Canadian film industry. Like I said, it is relative. It's kind of a back and forth thing. There's a lot to be said for A, being a continent on your own, and B, not living right up above the crack house / meth lab that is Hollywood-driven America.
No, it's true. I mean, I hesitate to say it, but yeah, the Hollywood industry is it's kind of rough.
Yeah. There's one part of Canada that does fairly well in terms of making its own films and selling its own films to its own people, but that's Quebec.
Yeah.
Because they speak a different language.
Right. I mean, right off the bat, I enjoyed this. I wasn't sure what to expect. I figured it'd be sort of a drama, having read the plot synopsis.
Yeah.
But it's almost like a comedy, but then it's a drama. There's sort of psychosexual stuff it sort of goes into.
It's it's very much it's very stagey. It's a real three-hander. A very, you could do a stage version of it, I think, and not lose too much. But I also think that in a lot of ways it's a drama that has the pacing of a comedy.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, there are parts to it that just seemed like downright out of a comedy, like when they go, and we'll go in order, but like when they're at the drive-in movie theater.
Oh, yes. That was actually something that Jocelyn Moorhouse's husband / production partner, PJ Hogan, came up with. He suggested it and she was like, oh my God, that's perfect. And, so it wasn't like him putting ears on the donkey or something like that. But, if she'd been given her complete druthers, it would have been a considerably less funny film. But the great thing that I find with Australian films generally is that they tend to have this really sarcastic sense of humor, which kind of is, things are so bad you kind of have to laugh.
Yeah, I think that's probably, it's due to a bunch of very pasty people that have to live in like one of the hottest areas on Earth.
Yeah.
Deal with some of the deadliest animals on Earth.
Yeah, that's definitely it. My dad always said, let's face it, we were forced to move here, and now none of us want to go. It's like the ultimate passive aggressiveness. It's like, nah, fuck you, mate. We're staying.
But yeah, so I guess let's go in roughly chronological order, bring up stuff when we think about it. For some reason, the beginning of this film, when they introduce Hugo Weaving's character, I thought about the beginning of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I think it's like the way he's just like walking and like it's almost like nothing, like if there's something in his way, he's just going to knock it over kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's true. Thankfully, there's no little kid that he does the romper stomp.
No, there isn't. I mean, there is a cat, and I will say I was very glad they pulled it back to be like, just kidding, because I was like, oh, this is going to be tough psychologically if the beginning is like a blind man kills a cat. Then it's like, oh, how do I even feel about that?
Yeah, even accidentally,
Right, yeah.
Because I think it would have been accidental.
Right, no, I mean, he didn't do it maliciously. Yeah, so I don't know if I've actually said what the plot of the film is, so I'll say that first. Hugo Weaving plays a blind man who is a photographer.
Yes.
And I mean, more or less that is the film. You know, he has a friend he meets, and he has a housekeeper that's sort of not even mildly obsessed with him, just obsessed with him.
Yep. Yeah, she's super into him, and he is super not into her.
Yeah, there's almost like a secretary thing going on, except it's not.
Yeah, it's funny. Hugo Weaving has occasionally said, well, you know, I didn't think it was very realistic that she would be so into him given the way that he treated her. And I'm like, you don't understand why a woman would be super into a blind man who should be completely dependent on her, who looks like you.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, Hugo. I mean, you know, we already knew that there's this very funny story about when they were shooting Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. The director got all three main characters, the actors, dressed up in drag and took them to a gay bar, and to observe like what would they act like. So Guy Pearce got up on the bar and started you know, doing the twist and cadging drinks from people and starting fights between various bar patrons. And Terrence Stamp sat in the back looking very, very dignified, and let people come to him. And Hugo Weaving, on the other hand, started to cry.
Okay.
Got real drunk and started to cry. Like, oh no, nobody's going to love me. I look like a frog. I look like a frog in a dress. And, you know, so I think Hugo kind of undersells his own attractiveness. But the point with Celia, Genevieve Pico's character, is that she sees a possibility with Martin, his character, that she could have all the power in the relationship.
Yeah, because you get the sense, she explains at some point in the film, you know, her mother has passed away and I'm pretty sure she says she doesn't have any family.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think there's a desperation to it. Like, she's very lonely. I mean, obviously she's very lonely. She hangs out with Martin, who just treats her like total crap.
Yes, that's true. And she does it to him in reverse as well.
Yeah, in return, yeah, you know, like later on in the film, you realize she's been sneaking to the park.
Yep.
To like grab his dog and like basically hold it.
That's right.
Like,
my dog's not coming back. You know, I don't know why every time I go to this park, my dog runs away from me. Yeah, well, there's a reason for that, Martin. You know, or the fact that she blackmails him into going on a date with her by taking a picture of him on the John.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. Because, yeah, when you know, in the beginning of the film, you're just like, wow, this guy's a jerk, and I don't know why this housekeeper would stay. But, like, you know, once you get near the middle of the film, it's like, oh, she gives it right back. So it's almost like they are in this, like, toxic kind of codependent relationship, except one of them doesn't want to be in the relationship.
Well, I mean, I have to wonder about that, too, because, you know, it's like Martin's sort of reason for becoming a photographer is that he's been blind his whole life. He's always been dependent on other people to tell him what the world is like around him, most specifically his mother. And he had this thing going on where he almost wanted to catch her in a lie so that he could break that power that she had over him. And it's particularly creepy when you look back on it through flashbacks and you realize that, you know, to some degree that allowed him to not feel bad about her dying of cancer, you know, and sort of like.
Yeah, that scene is really rough. Like, she tells him, I'm going to die. And he's like, I don't believe you. And then, you know, it cuts to a coffin and he's like, it's hollow. And it's like, oh, God.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. You know, he wants to have whatever tiny bit of power he can get because he's in this position where, you know, as a blind man, as a man who's never seen at all, he's surrounded by people who have potential power over him. And so that tangled thing of that relationship with his mother, I think extends really to almost every other woman that he's ever met.
Yeah, no, I would say so. I mean, we get the sense that he's a virgin because they're after the date that and I'm blanking on her name again.
Celia.
Celia, yes. After
Yeah.
the date, Celia blackmails him into going to. And he seems to have a nice time. She takes him to the symphony, and he's like really moved. And
Yeah.
then they go back to hers for, like port and cold meats.
Yeah.
It was a bit weird, but
Well, she knows what he likes. This is the thing, it's like, and again, that's like the power that she has over him. She has observed his life, she.
No, it's true. But so she like is like, let's have sex, basically.
Yeah.
And he's like, seems to sort of be into it at first, and then he just turns on a dime and is like, no, I don't want this. But yeah, you wonder how much of that is him actually not wanting it, or how much of that is just being like very, I hesitate to say damaged, but I don't know, just not.
Well, yeah, I mean, he doesn't want to be out of control. Whatever bit of control he's got.
Yeah, I guess that he can't stand losing control, and that's one
huge,
like
and,
major loss of control.
I mean, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that you necessarily look at this relationship between these two people and go, oh, of course, in the rest of the world, women usually have less control and men have more control. But the fact is that, yeah, there's a bit of that going on as well. Who knows what's gone on with Celia? You don't know. Celia could have had all sorts of traumatic stuff happen in her life, and which might make her want to find a guy that she can have ultimate power over, because she feels like.
No, yeah, I think what's interesting about the film is it doesn't, other than Hugo Weaving's character, I keep saying that, Martin, right?
Martin.
Yeah, Martin. Other than Martin's character, we don't really get the backstory, or we don't get explicit flashback of any other character.
No, it's all
and I mean,
Martin.
There's only really like three major ones.
Yeah, it's all Martin. It's literally from Martin's POV, which is a weird way to put it because he's blind. But the fact is that, yeah, his POV is privileged. And we are stuck with him and kind of inside of him for the entire film. And, which is, to me, is like a mark of the daringness of the film and the ambition of the film, which is, to say, I'm gonna stick you inside of this arrogant, deceptive, utterly bitter man, and I'm somehow gonna make you like it. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Hugo Weaving's a very charismatic man.
I mean, he does an amazing job, in his performance. I can't imagine how difficult it has to be to sort of lock your face and your eyes in such a way, just that, because you're not supposed to, the eyes aren't supposed to work in any way, so you're not supposed to have any stimuli, so it's like supposed to be nothing, but with someone who can see, like sometimes that's not.
Yeah, no, it's very, very difficult to do those kind of blindisms. And I mean, all I can think is that maybe he tried to unfocus his eyes as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, that could be it.
Yeah, but it's got to be hard, and it's particularly impressive the way that he can show you what's going on inside of Martin through those eyes and through little micro expressions, and still keep his eyes completely unfocused.
No, it is impressive. We haven't mentioned Russell Crowe's character yet.
Yes, Russell Crowe, so young that he looks thin in this film. Yeah, this was like one of his very early films.
Was this before Romper Stomper or after?
No, it was pretty much immediately after Romper Stomper.
Right. It's probably a good thing. You don't want to get typecast as that.
Yeah, well, he did this, and pretty much immediately after this, I think he did a movie which was about a gay man and his relationship with his dad, who's like the most loving and accepting dad in the world, and also, like a big tough Australian dude. So yeah, I think he was trying real hard not to be stuck in romper stomper mode for the rest of his life.
I mean, that is fair. You don't want to get typecast as a white supremacist.
Exactly. But I do know that at the time that they were auditioning people for the part of Andy, Jocelyn Moorhouse apparently didn't necessarily want to see Russell Crowe because she thought he was too
I
attractive.
guess I could see that. Yeah. I mean, you're trying not to upstage Hugo Weaving. So
That's true. But also, she was thinking of Andy as being a kind of, a happy-go-lucky, but a character part, not a handsome guy, not like, oh, that incredibly handsome guy washing dishes. Of course, when you look at Russell Crowe part by part, he's not the most handsome guy in the world.
no. I mean, he's sort of got the Cro-Magnon forehead thing going on.
Yeah,
Which, to be fair, I also have. But
and that big mole that he's got.
that's true. Yeah, he does have the
between
mole.
his eyebrows. Yeah. But he is extremely charismatic. And what's interesting to me is that even at the time that I saw it, essentially what happened was my dad wrote to me and said, proof is really, really good. You should go see it. I think I did see it when I was on my last visit to Australia, before I took a break and didn't come back until I was 30. I'm not going to go into that, but the fact is that, for a long time, in my childhood, my teenagerhood, I went back and forth to Australia basically every year.
I mean, it's a really long flight.
Oh
isn't
boy.
It?
Yeah. It's a particularly long flight when you're like 9 years old.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh yeah, and people are still smoking on planes.
I didn't even think about that.
That was incredible. But I'm pretty sure I saw it for the first time in Australia, and then I saw it a couple of times here. And yeah, but if my dad hadn't written to me about it, I wouldn't necessarily have gone to see it.
Right, yeah, I was going to say, I've never actually heard of this film. And I mean, I have, pardon the pun, but blind spots when it comes to cinema. But, like normally I've heard of most, I don't know how to say this without seeming like I'm omnipotent. I've seen a lot of films, is what I'm saying. Like I've heard of a lot of films.
Yeah, no.
But I had never, this was just not on my radar.
Yeah, and this is probably thought of as one of the formative films of like the indie wave of the late 80s and the early 90s in Australia. So, in Australia, it's a big deal. It's big in Japan.
Yeah, no, I mean, but yeah.
But yeah, my dad was always doing that. We went to see Gallipoli too, Peter Weir's movie Gallipoli, which was one of the first things that people saw Mel Gibson in over here, aside from Mad Max.
Okay, we're back. So before the break, we were, I have a leaky brain. I don't remember what we were talking. I mean, obviously we were talking about
Proof.
Proof.
Yeah.
1991 film by Jocelyn Moorhouse. Yeah, I don't know that we're going to be able to talk about it chronologically because it seems like we keep just bringing up different parts of the film.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's me.
No, that's
around.
okay. That's fine. But I guess.
Oh, we had basically gotten to Andy.
Oh yes, so we had gotten to Andy.
Yeah.
I guess I'll do a real quick. Okay, so
cool.
I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but we are introduced to Andy, who works at I believe it's an Italian restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a dishwasher. Then, we're kind of cutting between him and Martin, who's walking around, kind of bumping into people. And at some point, Andy goes outside to smoke a cigarette, and he sees Martin walk by and he just crashes into some trash and ends up hitting this cat who was there.
Yeah. The cat whose name I think is Ugly.
Yeah, I believe it's Ugly, yes.
Yeah.
So I guess this would be your inciting incident because it brings
the two of them together.
Well, it sort of brings Andy and Martin together. It takes a little bit because I think it isn't until Martin actually visits this Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
That he actually meets with Andy.
Exactly. At first it's like, Andy calling him out, which I think surprises him because a lot of people don't do that. Martin is always pushing things as far as he possibly can. And again, Hugo Weaving talked about how when he was preparing for the role, he went and he, observed a bunch of blind people. And one of the people that he observed was a guy who would deliberately go around knocking into people all the time because he was like, yeah, nobody ever says anything.
I mean, that's kind of great. I know it's sort of rude, but
Yeah, no, it's super rude. And, people would look around. He'd have his dark glasses on. They'd be like, what the? Oh, sorry, mate. It's like- and I guess, that was like, again, that tiny little bit of power, right? That tiny little bit of privilege.
yeah, no, I think, yeah, so much of the film is about power and agency
Hmm.
when in reality you don't have much.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Andy calls him out. That obviously sticks in Martin's mind. He's fairly aware of the neighborhood because he has to be, and manages to find his way back to the restaurant. And the next thing you know, Andy's like looking out of the kitchen, seeing Martin being seated. And then we get that wonderful moment where Martin can't get a waiter or a waitress, and he just knocks over his wine so that, so that someone.
It's even better than that. He intentionally puts the glass out of range of where he's pouring the wine.
Perfect.
So he just is like pouring wine onto the table.
Yeah, exactly. And, again, it's like, and you can see Andy just gets this, Russell Crowe grin on his face. Like, it's like, that's the dude.
Yeah, so and then we cut to outside, and Andy is outside, and he, Martin's leaving, and he kind of calls him on like, did you not eat anything? Like, did you not pay?
Yeah.
I was actually, that is one thing. I wasn't sure whether he did actually, like whether he was being honest about I never got my food or whether he did eat and just left.
It could be either. It could totally be either. But obviously there's like this bubble of attraction. And I think that weirdly, what Andy and Martin see in each other is the same thing. Andy thinks of Martin as being a ridiculously, not an honest person, but just someone who's going to do what he's going to do. And, what's that thing where you're just like blunt?
Yeah.
Super blunt. And Martin, for some reason, the fact that Andy called him out on his behavior gives him the impression that Andy is honest. And he begins to think of Andy as a person from whom he can get an actually objective opinion.
Which, I mean, yeah, at some point even Andy says that's not entirely fair because he's like, I'm sort of a fuck up, man. Like,
yeah, exactly. And, the whole idea of saying, this person will tell the truth. This person always lies. Andy himself by the end is like, mate, you can't divide the world like that. You have to have some faith in other people because all of us are going to lie at some point.
Right. No, it's true.
All of us are going to fuck up. All of us are going to, it's like it doesn't mean that everything else gets thrown out the window. Your mother can love you and lie.
It's true.
And you can misinterpret her and think she's lying when she's actually telling the truth.
No, that's true. So we get, at some point, Andy's like, you killed Ugly. And we cut to them opening like a trash can.
Yeah.
And there's just the cat there, which was sort of horrifying. I was like, you just put it in a trash can?
Yeah.
But
the cat is not in fact dead, so they end up.
It isn't, which is funny because it's the blind guy who actually notices that. He like actually checks the pulse and he's like, "Hey, the cat isn't actually dead."
Yeah, exactly. So because he has those sensitive blind fingers. The way that
right. Oh well, because he also checked.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. There's also
yeah.
that.
He didn't go just off of sight.
Yeah.
So.
There's also that. Yeah, that's the other thing.
So they go to a vet and.
Yeah, they go to a vet and I think it's at that point that Andy first sees Martin taking pictures of things.
Yeah. He poses Andy and he's like, "Okay, does the cat look like dead?" And he's like, "Yeah," and he takes a picture.
Yeah.
Which at that point I was like, oh my, like I was almost thinking like, is the cat actually dead? And he just wanted to take a picture in a vet with a dead cat. I don't think he's that terrible. Like obviously now I know by the end of the film, like he wouldn't do that. But
no.
Early on I was like, oh, I don't know.
Well, this is the thing. Martin is a very private person in that particular way. It's like, at first you're like, what is his moral structure? And he's not about to just let it slip. You have to know him for a while to know what his moral structure
No,
is.
it's true. But so they go to the vet, and there's sort of like a montage of him taking pictures of people at the vet.
And we get that.
Yeah, at some point, Martin asks Andy, "Can you like do this not full time, but frequently for me? Could describe these pictures?
Yeah.
And then I'll label them with a label maker that has Braille, so I can tell what picture is what."
Yes, exactly. And this becomes, this weird sort of job, sort of friendship. Again, I don't think Martin knows how to make friends. I don't think he's had a lot of friends.
No, I mean, he's I say this as someone that can be very blunt at times. Sometimes people don't appreciate that. Yeah. So it can be sort of difficult when you're just like,
people don't.
That up front.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's like, what's the last time that you hired somebody to do things for you? Oh, that was Celia. So in a way, he's kind of like laying a trap for Andy at the same time. And this is classic Martin. It's like always there's some sense of laying a trap that is going to reveal whether or not a person is trustworthy. So it's interesting. But yeah, so they end up hanging around together. They end up, going to the park together. They go to, as you said, the drive-in movie together.
They do. And what's interesting to me, too, is having not seen the film yet, there are all these moments where I'm like, is this going to turn into a horror film? Or just like a really violent, like, because, during the drive-in scene, there's like an attack. And at some point I'm like, okay, does this become like,
no, it's just
Andy gets like beaten to death and then Hugo Weaving has to figure out like who did it? And
that would be a very different film.
It would be a very different film, but I wasn't I was like, I'm fairly sure this is going to stay a drama, but I don't know that for a fact.
No, absolutely, and and from that you get it's just Aussies roughing each other up, basically.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean,
it's like your blind friend showed prophylactics to my girlfriend. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, but it gets very like Animal House. They're like, let's get out of here. And they like, hop in the car and haul ass out of there. And then a cop starts following them.
Yeah, well, Martin's driving. There's that.
Martin, yeah, he's like sitting in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And as a result, they end up crashing into this police car.
Right.
And then Martin goes, I'm blind, and tries to play it off like,
I think I'm blind.
Yeah, and they cut to the hospital, and the cop's like, I don't know how to tell you this, Andy, but your friend is blind.
Yeah. Yes.
And then they cut to the nurse who's like, you've been blind your whole life, haven't you, Martin? And he's like, yep. And she's like, why are you driving? He's like, I forgot.
Yes. Yeah, and that, that could be a really silly, over-the-top scene, but it's not, because you've got great actors dealing with it. And yeah, and because it's very fast. Again, that's sort of like bang, 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 and then you're past it. And it, there's so much contortionate emotion inside of Proof as a story that you need those moments. You need those moments where you let a little bit of the air out.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's nice levity, because if you didn't have scenes like that, it would just be much more kind of grim, and like the psychosexual stuff would be much more in your face.
Oh yeah.
Not that it isn't already, but
yeah, but I mean, Genevieve Pico, who we haven't spoken much about so far,
right,
as
that's true,
in terms of her acting. Yeah, she's a really interesting looking woman. She didn't travel a lot outside of Australia. I mean, she's been working very consistently. And indeed, she's worked with Jocelyn Moorhouse a couple more times, in The Dressmaker, for example. But I think most of what she does is either television or stage. She's very much a stage actor. And
yeah, I was going to say, she has that sort of quality to her performance.
Yeah, and she's got that interesting Glenda Jackson kind of face, where she is piquant. She's not beautiful per se, but she's got a lot of personality in there. Great voice. Everybody's got a great voice.
No, it's true. And yes, she just the way she plays it is like at times it's like borderline dominatrixy. It's
Oh
interesting.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just kind of I think it ties into the whole like I'm your maid and you're like I'm in charge of you kind of a
Celia
thing.
is super sly.
Right? Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm taking pictures of you on the toilet
I'm
without your
popping you
permission. Yeah.
from the bottom. Yeah.
Right. She does that a lot. And, like before you get a sense of their relationship, you're like, oh my God, really? Like,
Yes. I'm moving your furniture around so that you'll crash into
but
it.
by the end, you realize, like, okay, so they kind of give it to each other, like, pretty evenly. So it's not quite as terrible when she's moving stuff in
Yep.
the way of the door.
You know. Yeah, it's this real back and forth of passive aggression because, you know, um she knows what she wants. Martin knows what she wants. Martin isn't going to give it to her. She knows he's not going to give it to her. Which is why eventually she decides to take Andy away from him because she sees that the relationship that Martin has with Andy, you know, is it super intimate friendship? Is it, is there actually a spark of attraction there? I don't know. But the fact is that this is a dude who has known him for like a couple of weeks and is suddenly
Right. And
really,
they're already so close, and
yeah,
she's known him for
yeah,
years, and he's still kind of pulling
yeah.
away.
And that wonderful moment where she takes all the photos that he's gotten bits and pieces of Andy in and lays them on the bed like she's trying to put Andy together. It's like, who is this guy? Who's this person? And yeah, so she sets herself for Andy, and and Andy being just a bloke, just a
He's just a young guy,
just a
so
young guy.
he's a fairly easy
Yeah,
target.
exactly. It's like she's the kind of woman who's got, she's super sly. She's got great eyes. She's got this amazing posh voice. She's the kind of woman you think, wears like stockings under her maid's outfit or whatever, and so it's very easy in a lot of ways for her to get him to come to bed with her. But very quickly, Andy realizes that she has only done this to drive a wedge between him and Martin.
Right. There's a great I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but so when they go on their date after she's taken a picture of Martin on the toilet,
Yep.
like they she tries to have sex with him and he's really horrified. But before that, we get this really interesting, it's almost like a borderline thriller moment where it's like
Yeah.
there's the blind man sitting in this woman's house. I assume he's never been in there. And we kind of pull back to reveal
Yes, exactly. It's like the shrine to
like
Martin.
every surface of wall is covered in a picture of Martin. And like this is another moment where I was like, this could very easily go in a very, very dark, like you're not gonna leave,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like, I got you here now.
And I think that's interesting that they put this into a seemingly, I mean, normal's a weird word to say about this, but it's a seemingly normal drama. I mean, there's nothing like too, I mean, it's an interesting film and it does interesting things, but ultimately it is a drama.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, Celia and Martin are very similar.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons that he does not want to get involved with her, because he knows
Yeah,
that,
you don't want to join a club if they let you
well,
in, kind of a thing.
yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the two of them are big drama people. It's like Mr. Drama King and Miss Drama Queen.
And then you get
And
Andy, who's just like, I wash dishes.
yeah, I wash dishes. I like this cat.
Yeah. I call this cat ugly. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's true. And he's kind of caught between the two of them. But, the fact is that, Celia is the loneliest person there. And I like that eventually Martin is kind enough to say to her that she really needs to go somewhere else and she really needs to do something.
Right. I mean, it's incredibly unhealthy. And I don't know if they ever specify how many years she's been working for him, but
I'd say at least 2, possibly.
yeah, it seemed like at least a couple. And it's like, you get the sense she doesn't really have any friends.
Yeah.
Definitely not a boyfriend.
No.
You know, she's established she has no family.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just really sad, pining for someone for so many years and then like also working for them.
But she really does feel that she owns him as well, you know, in
That's
a
true,
strange
though,
way.
which is also, you know, there's an entitlement that's not deserved
Yeah,
either.
absolutely. In a strange way, I think, you know, Celia treats him like, you know, some really eccentric, you know, old cat that you can't get to like you, but you're always picking it up and trying to stroke it.
Yeah, I mean, there is this sort of like, you get the sense that like the more he doesn't want her, the more she wants him.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. She wants to infringe on his dignity, you know?
Basically.
Yeah.
But so yeah, there is an interesting mirroring effect when Andy, there's a big blowout basically where the sequence of events is essentially, so Martin's in the park and, you know, his dog has been running off. He doesn't know why. Andy follows him to the park, but doesn't initiate, you know, doesn't tell him he's there. And at one point, his dog, Martin's dog, runs off. And Andy can see that the Cecilia is actually like holding the dog. Like she has a treat and gets the dog that way. And then we'll hold the dog so he doesn't come back when he's called. And at some point, Martin starts taking pictures in the direction that the dog went. And Andy sort of very sheepishly tries to run out of the frame before he takes the picture.
Yep.
But this is like this is the beginning of her sort of plan to get Martin against Andy because, you know, at some point Andy shows up with Martin and they're going through the pictures and there's the picture of Andy trying to run out of the frame and she's there with the dog.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that Andy, you know, he might want to get laid or something. So he doesn't say, for whatever his reason is, or maybe he does say he doesn't want to hurt Martin's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, he lies about this one photo.
Yeah, and she knows that she can get him to lie about that photo, you know?
Right, and so this leads, this is sort of how her plan unfolds. At one point, Martin's going to be taking his dog to get a shot at the vet. And so she takes the label maker and like lists, I guess, or it might, no, I'm sorry. This might have already had the label on it.
Mm-hmm.
But she puts this photo in the collar of the dog. So when Martin goes to the vet with this dog, the vet's like, oh, there's a photo here. And Martin reads the caption is like, oh, it's like a dog with another dog or whatever Andy had told him. And he said, no, there's a woman and there's a man. And so he realizes that Andy's been lying.
Yes.
And he storms home and, you know, Andy and Cecilia have been making love. And there's just a huge blowout. Andy's like, I'm in love with your maid, basically.
Yeah. And then, you know.
And he screams at them both to get out. And then we cut to Cecilia's house. And it's this great scene because, yeah, it's a mirroring of the scene with Martin. Except now you have Andy who actually, you know, has his sight. And he just looks around the walls and it's like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, it's like.
Nothing but pictures of Martin.
Okay, so I see what's going on here. You know?
And he sort of, you know, he's not the smartest guy, but he's not an idiot. So he's finally like, oh, you're just doing this so that you can have him for yourself.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. And, you know, suddenly she's reframed in his eyes. She isn't this, you know, fascinating older woman, you know, this, not quite sex goddess, but yeah, she does have a little air of penthouse letter to her, I think.
I was going to say there's sort of a, are you trying to seduce me? like,
yeah, exactly.
Thing going on.
Yeah, exactly. But suddenly she's reframed in his eyes and he realizes how lonely she is and how obsessed she is and how sad that is because, you know, she's not a dumb person either. You know, it's like you get the feeling that Celia could be a lot of things, but for some reason, this is what she's chosen to do with her life for like the last 3 years.
And I mean, he's a little pissed too because when he says he loves her, I think he means it, but like she doesn't give a shit about him. She's just using him to get him, you know, out of the picture.
Yeah, exactly. You know, It's like if I wanted to have sex with a yoik, I could do it any time.
Yeah. And let me think. It's around this point that Martin, he goes to the grave of his mother, which is a very powerful scene. Because there's been a flashback earlier to establish he doesn't believe his mom when she says, I'm dying. And even when there's a coffin, he's like, oh, I think he just thinks she hated having a blind son, so she kind of fled.
Yeah, that's exactly what he thinks, which is nuts.
It's totally nuts. Yeah, and so he goes to this grave site and he checks the date, and it says 1965, obviously. And so he asks the person who's working at the graveyard, like, do a lot of people do?
Yeah.
It's sort of an insane question. Yeah. Do a lot of people do like practical jokes where they bury an empty coffin? And he's like, no, it's pretty expensive, like sort of nuts. And he kind of finally is like, oh, wow. That is sort of crazy, isn't it?
Little. Yeah, and again,
it's like, I guess he assumed they buried an empty coffin for 40 years or whatever.
I mean, it really is one of those, does he believe it or does he not believe it? It's like, it's one of those stories that you tell yourself when you're a kid. And I think as an adult, he tells it in a ha-ha kind of way, like, well, this is crazy, but da-da-da-da-da-da. But on some level, he does believe it. On some level, he is that kid still, Right.
And so, but I think after he visits his mother's grave, he kind of has this epiphany of like, oh, wow, I'm kind of an asshole.
Yep.
I mean, I think maybe he had framed it as like, I am this persecuted, but like ultimately strong character. But I think after he revisits, I keep saying revisits. I mean, he has been with his dead mother before, holding the coffin. But when he finally like pieces together, like, why would she lie about that? Yeah. That's really crazy. He realizes he's been kind of this, like, he's let his own issues like impact other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to let your own issues impact you. It's like, that's a choice. But when you hurt the people around you, I mean, it's, he's probably spent a lot of time going like, well, nobody cares if I live or die, but.
Right. And meanwhile, there's a woman that has like her whole house covered in photos of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a random dishwasher who's like hanging out with him all the time and tell him, what's in a photograph, and who's genuinely like friends with him.
Yes. And this is how you have this moment where it's like he decides to grow up. It's like he decides, I can make another choice now, which is to accept that there are people who could love me, and there are people who could give me the kind of, company, just being with people, being with human, the human contact that I have been denying myself. But I have to be responsible towards those people as well.
Right. And then he has that moment with Cecilia where he's like,
yeah, Celia, it's not going to work.
Fired,
Yeah.
And it's a mercy, really, because, I mean, she doesn't, like, you get the sense she would have just indefinitely tried for him.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he knows that, too, and he realizes how cruel that actually is.
Yes. Yeah. It's one thing to, because he's never been that overt with her, really. It's like he sort of let her go on like this. And so to finally say, it is never going to happen, and I don't want you in my house anymore, and give me back my keys. And,
I mean, there was a moment earlier in the film where it's her birthday, and she just comes by, and she's like, I'm making a cake because it's my birthday. And he's just sort of like, more or less, fuck you, why are you at my house?
Yeah.
So,
but at the same time,
he's
I can't
not been
stop
a nice
you.
person.
I can't stop you, so sure.
Yeah.
Make the cake.
But yeah, so she, she's like, fine, throws the key in the sink, and leaves, and obviously has to move the coat rack in front of the door before she leaves.
Yes, it's true.
It's like her one final victory.
Yeah, it's like, happy coat rack in the crotch.
Yeah, but and then we start winding down the film. Andy comes back, and I don't remember if he explicitly apologizes, but that's more or less why he came by.
Yeah, yeah.
And Martin, I think, is smart enough. He gets the sense, like, okay, he feels bad. He didn't do that on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. But I do like that essentially it's like, if you want to ask me if I'm never going to lie to you again, I cannot say that I will never lie to you again because I'm a human being.
Right. He's like, he kind of finally lets him know, like, how ridiculous it is to expect there to be one person whose entire job is to always tell you the truth.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially when that person is someone hops from job to job and they're a black sheep and a dishwasher. And
yeah, exactly. And a bit of a fuck up.
Their big claim to fame is they're going to start a mail order business.
Yeah, I forgot about that. The mail order business.
I mean, yeah, that's the last. He's like, I'm starting a mail order business, and Martin's like, yeah, whatever.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, and there's this really powerful moment at the end where he's hinted. Martin's hinted that he has this one photograph that he doesn't want to let Andy describe to him.
Yeah.
For a while, and he finally brings this photo out and asks him, what's in the photo.
Mm-hmm.
And Andy's describing it. There's a man with a rake, and there's a garden, and it looks like it's autumn. And you realize there have been all these flashback moments where his mother was telling him exactly this, like, this is what's outside. And he never believed her.
Yeah, I mean...
And so now he finally has, like, the proof that, like, she was telling the truth. That's exactly what was outside.
The whole idea that, and I've had this feeling sometimes. And I think anybody who doesn't necessarily see things the way that other people see them has this feeling, where it can be as simple as, I am blind and you're telling me what's outside the window, but you could be lying because why wouldn't you? You can, and therefore why would you not? If I was you, I would lie,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have that with friends, family, loved ones, like the whole, you say you love me, but I feel like you just don't know me, or maybe you're doing this for another reason, and then, I don't know, 20 years down the line, you're going to be like,
exactly.
Gotcha.
Or, when I was younger, because of my own neurotypicality, people would tell me things like, well, the world is just this way, da-da-da-da-da-da, you have to do this, you have to do that, or otherwise this and that is going to happen. And I'd be like, I understand that you believe that, but it just doesn't seem real to me. It doesn't seem right, because I know for myself that that's not the way that I see things. You know what I mean? So I think, so I think that,
no, I know what
I
you
think
mean,
that this seems to be about a very specific, situation, but Proof is a film that applies to everyone. And that's why it's such a good film.
It is. I mean, it's great. Great performances. Like you said, it could be made into a stage play.
Yep.
I do think it works as a film, though.
Absolutely.
Just getting to see various set pieces.
And great score, too.
Yeah, the score, I was going to say, that's really great. The editing is good. Obviously, the editing had to be good.
Yeah.
And the sound design obviously had to be good, too, because I don't know if this is true, but it seemed like sometimes they were really cranking up the sound.
Yeah, I think
to just like really emphasize sound and how important that is to a blind person.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just a beautifully made film. And, once again, we can get into the, unfortunately, still true fact that if a guy had made this film, he would have been getting work hand over fist. Like a minute later.
Yeah, it would have been up for awards.
And it was up for awards and it won awards.
Well, yeah.
But I'm just really interested in the fact that still, it's like, we know who Hugo Weaving is. We know who Russell Crowe is. We know who PJ Hogan is. We don't necessarily know who Jocelyn Moorhouse is.
No, I mean, that's a good point. And especially especially back in 91 too, because like it's very easy to do the revisionist thing where you're like, well, nowadays
Yeah, I
more
mean, a
women
little
are,
bit.
but it's like, yeah, but not then.
Absolutely.
And even nowadays, it's like you still get people that are swept under the rug all the
So
time.
many times, but it's the same thing with every Australian film having to be representative of all Australian films, right?
Right, yeah, which is
Hmm.
that's sort of tricky. And admittedly, my knowledge of Australian film is very limited. Like I'm a horror fan, so I knew about,
Yeah.
the boom of Australian horror, which I believe was mid 2000s ish.
Well, and
Well,
there's
I mean,
also
okay, I'm sure it started before
there's
that, but
also the Ozploitation era of like the mid 1970s to the mid 1980s.
right, yeah. But I guess my point is, yeah, my knowledge is limited of Australian film, so I think it was good that I got to see this.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I was able to recommend it to you and that you were able to experience it for the first time because I think,
Yeah, I really loved the film, and I think it is important, though. Yeah, like you said, so many Australian films that like an American audience or any other kind of global audience would see
hmm.
are just so like aggressively Australian
Yeah, it's
that it's
true.
like that's their whole thing. They're like, it's the Australian film about being Australian. And you're like,
Mm.
oh, okay.
Well, worst example for the last like 10 years is probably Australia by Baz Luhrmann. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but there are some great. I mean, I think of like Snowtown Murders, which was like just so heavy.
Oh, incredible. Yeah, absolutely. But always when you think about an Australian film, people, their brains immediately go to Crocodile Dundee.
Right, yeah, and that's probably a disservice. But anyway, yeah, I think that's gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. It was really great. I had a lot of fun.
And yeah, do let me know if you ever want to cover any other films, because obviously I have no life. So,
Absolutely. I can send you a list.
all right, sounds good.
All right.
Well,
Okay.
thanks for listening, everybody, and we have more episodes coming out, so stay tuned. Oh, and we're on Twitter at Celluloid Sits. All right, thank you.